draw on the African heritage practices to
Welcome.
In her new book,
to
Farming
Thank
While
You,
Black,
Harry Droz.
Leah
He is
Penniman,
the
co-founder of Soulfire Farm, has created a profound resource of science,
welcome back
history,
to
practice,
WNHH
healing,
Community
and
Radio,
inspiration for Black and Brown people and their
FM New
allies
Haven.
to create
This is
transformational
Arch
change
Respond,
and
I'm
find
Lucy
liberation
Gellman.
on land.
I am here today with
Leah and her
Natalia
family are dear
Berginski,
friends of mine, and I serve on the board of
Damien or
Soulfire
Dame
Farm.
Dillard,
I felt a
and,
combination of
and
exhilaration
Imani
in
Cotton,
recording
and
this
we will be
interview
talking
and a feeling
about
that there was no way to cover the
relatively
massive
new,
number of
although
topics
I
woven
feel like
through
I've
this
known
book
about this
and the
for
work of this community.
now a number of months, and
At
Natalia,
the core is the African and
may be
indigenous
old
principle
at this
that
point
all
in your
living
mind.
things are interconnected, and that
People's
true health,
history
true
tour
freedom,
of a number of
true
New Haven
happiness
neighborhoods.
can
So
only be
first
found
of all,
when we work in balance with each
welcome
other
to all
and
of you,
everything
and I
around
should
us.
say you're part of the larger
Farming While Black
Metro Business
beautifully
Academy
illustrates
family.
how to put this principle into
welcome.
practice through farming,
thank you for having
community
us.
building,
Oh my
internal
gosh,
and
thank you for
communal
coming.
healing,
I've been
and the
really excited
decolonization
about
of the
this for a
world.
number of weeks. I
In
love
an
the
era
city
where Black
and I love
communities
learning
suffer
about the city's
disproportionately
history.
from
So,
illnesses related to lack of
for
access to fresh
Natalia,
food
first,
and
just
healthy
as
natural
we get into
ecosystems,
this,
where
I wanted
violence and
to
discrimination
ask
have led to the
you
decline in the number
the
of Black
class that
farmers
this
to less
came
than
out of
2%,
for. So some
and where
people may know
85% of the
you
people working
and
the
your
land are
work a little
exploited
bit if they
Latinx
read, for
indigenous
instance,
migrant
the New
workers.
Haven
There
Independent
is
or the
much work to
Connecticut
be
Mirror,
done.
or if they happen to be your
Farming While
students at
Black
Metro.
and the circles of people and
But
communities
I'm
that
wondering if you can
contributed to
tell
the
me about the
wisdom in
class
its
that
pages
this came out
are
of,
great
which of course is
nourishment
a class
for the
dedicated
returning
to
generation of Black
African
farmers
and
and people
Latinx
committed
history.
to building a just
Yeah.
and life-giving
So
food
I can't
system.
talk about the class without
I hope you
talking
enjoy
about
listening
the
to this
students who actually
conversation.
made
It inspires
possible
you to
Yes.
learn more
by,
and get involved
by
in
going to
making
their
change.
legislators and demanding it in Connecticut. So major shout out
Hi,
to Students for
Leah.
Educational Justice
Tegan.
and Citywide Youth Coalition.
Thanks for making
and
time
Hearing
to
Youth
talk
Voices,
today.
Thank
Connecticut
you.
Students
It's
for
awesome
Dream.
to be talking to
We
a
have to
longtime
begin with
friend
them
and
because
supporter of
they
the
have made
project.
this possible.
Yeah.
And
So can you give us an
so
overview
I think our
of
class
what is
is
the work
the
that
first
Soulfire
one
Farm
in the
does?
state that actually combines African American
So
and Latinx
Soulfire Farm
history.
started
There's
in
certainly- there are
2010
other
with the mission
classes
to
that
end
focus
racism
on
and
one or
injustice
the
in the
other.
food system, which is a big mission,
and
but there's
this
three
past
basic
year
things
was
we
our
do.
first year doing it at
One
Metro,
is
and
we
it
raise
was,
food using
although,
sustainable
cut
Afro-Indigenous
short
methods
with in-person
and box
schooling,
that all up
it
every
was-
Wednesday and bring
it
it
was really
to about
powerful
400
and,
people in the
amazing
community,
to be a part
many
of.
of
I'm
whom
so
are living
grateful,
under food
and
apartheid,
privileged
meaning
to be
they
able to
don't
teach
have a
that
lot of
class.
money and they don't have access to fresh, healthy food.
Absolutely.
So that's delivered right to folks'
And
doorsteps. And that's
before
the
we go
foundation.
on
That's the
to
most
talk about
important
the
of the
project
three things.
itself, Harry, I'm
The
wondering
second
if you
thing
can
is that
play
we
one
run
of the
training
clips.
programs for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian farmer activist builders
Here
so
at
that they can
165
level up those
Columbus
hard
Avenue
skills that
stood
you
one of
need
New
to run a
Haven's public
land-based
high
business.
schools.
And
Lee
the
High
third
School was
thing
built in
is reparations
1964,
work.
but
Reparations
sadly was
means
shut down in
repair. It's
1985
about
after
returning
Yale bought the building
the
and turned it
land
into a school
resources
for
that were
nursing.
stolen from our
As we
ancestors
already
back to their
know, Yale owns
descendants.
an immense
And we
amount
do
of
that
land around New
through
Haven.
regional
As
and
of
national
2020, the
policy
combined
work,
university and
the creation
hospital
of a
property
land
value was
trust,
over
and our
4.7
reparations
billion.
fund.
With every piece of land that Yale buys,
So
they're exempt from
I
paying
am
property
so
taxes to the city of
extremely
New Haven.
excited and
In
happy
fact, as
to
of
be sitting here
2020,
with you with
nearly
this book,
6% of
Farming
New
While
Haven's
Black,
properties were
Soulfire
exempt
Farm's
from being
practical
taxed,
guide to
in large
liberation on
part due
land,
to
and
Yale.
to see it
This
in
leads our
the-
city to struggle,
in the
and
paper
because the
flesh.
primary ways schools are funded are through property
And I'm so
taxes,
proud of
it
you
means
that
our
you
schools
created
are
this,
severely
and with all
underfunded.
of the amazing people
One of
who
Lee High
helped to
School's
bring this
teachers,
about.
Lou Mae White,
And I wanted to
moved
start
to
our
New Haven from
conversation today
Alabama at a young
rooted
age.
in
She
asking about the
attended Hillwell's High
ancestors,
School,
since I know that is such a
graduating with the
grounding
class in
piece of your work.
1956.
And when
After
you open this
graduating from
book,
college in
the
Chicago,
first page
Lou
is
Mae
this
White
gorgeous
participated in freedom
painting
rides,
done by
riding
your
integrated
sister,
buses through the
Naima,
South
and
to
I'm wondering if
protest
you could
segregated terminals
describe
and
this
public
painting and
transportation,
what
for
the
which she was
story is
arrested
behind
many
this.
times. In 1968,
Sure.
Lou Mae
So
White
the
returned to New
painting
Haven
is
and taught
of
history at Lee
a
High School
grandmother
for
who
28
is
years. Her
braiding
ongoing
the seeds
practice
of
and good
cowpea,
trouble included a
millet,
week in jail
sorghum,
during
black
a teacher
rice,
strike
and
in
other
1975
African-Indigenous
and
crops
another
into
arrest
her
in
hair
2002
before
during
being
a
forced
sit-in
to
at
board
Yale in support of union
transatlantic
workers.
slave
Lou
ships
Mae White was awarded with the
and
Third
facing
Good
an
Marshall
uncertain
Award
future.
for her
And
dedication to
the
activism
picture
and her
shows
community
the
service.
vision
Lou Mae White
of
died in
what
New Haven
this
on
grandmother
September
believes is
10th,
possible.
2019.
She hasn't given up on her descendants, plants, and she believes in a future of tilling.
So that
and
is from A
reaping
People's
and
History
sustenance
of
on
the
land.
Hill. I don't know if people
And
were
to
able
me,
to,
this
viewers were able to
painting
see the screen
and this
share
true
that we were
story,
seeing.
which is a story of
I've
our
been
ancestors,
geeking out a little bit
represents
over
not
both
just the
A
seeds
People's
that we
History of
carried with
Dixwell
us
and A
in the
People's
journey,
History
but also
of the
all
Hill.
of the indigenous wisdom
For
about how to
everyone
be in
on
right
this call, and
relationship with
maybe
the
we'll
land
start
and
with
with
Dame
human
and
community,
Imani.
our
Where
knowledge of how
do
to
each of you live
test
in the city
soil with
now?
our
And what did
taste
you know
buds,
about the
and our
history of your
knowledge of
neighborhoods
making
going into this?
vermicompost and having collective work parties and economic systems for sharing, how to have polycultures and raised beds. So all of this wisdom about right
Going into this, I
relationship with the
didn't
earth
know
came
much
with
about
us.
the area.
And of course, we know throughout the history of
Yeah,
colonization
I
that the
moved
empire
around here
tried
when
to
I
stamp it out.
was in
But our
5th grade.
ancestors believed that
So from
in a
5th to
future
now,
we would
I didn't
reconnect
really
to
know
that
much going into
indigenous
this project.
wisdom.
Yeah.
For
All the things that
me, I
you
was
just
born in
mentioned,
New
if you
Orleans,
had
but
just said
because of
those
Hurricane
words, just
Katrina, it led to eventually
polyculture,
coming up here. For
soil
most of
testing,
my
like all these
childhood,
things,
I
most
lived in the
Americans would
hill
associate
already,
those things
but I did not
with
know none of
white
this history before, so
agricultural
I'm glad I did
practice.
take this
And
class
it's such
and
a
did this
core piece of
project
this
because it
book
made
that
me learn a lot
you're
more about New Haven.
actually bringing in this historical context of how these things are really
And
rooted in
Natalia, I'd love
African
to know from you
agricultural
as
systems.
well.
Oh,
And
yeah, of course.
can you talk a little bit about
I
at
live
what
in
point
New
in
Haven. I
your
live in
journey in
East
life
Rock on
you started
Orange,
to learn
and
about that and
also
understand that and why?
didn't know, so
Sure.
much about
So
the
I've been
history of this
farming since I was
neighborhood or of
16
the
years old,
city
so over 20 years now.
until students taught me
And
through this project.
while I deeply
Yeah,
loved
absolutely. And
farming
when you
as a
moved to New
teenager
Haven,
and felt that it
was
was my
there
life's
any
path
sort
as an
of
integration between
guide? Dame, I'm
environmental
interested
stewardship
from
and
you
social
too. Was there
justice.
any sort of
As
welcome
I
to New
started
Haven
to
guide
attend
that wasn't just
farming
like,
conferences,
hey, here are
and
some places you
read
can
books
shop
about
downtown?
farming and plan my future
I
in this
definitely
career,
didn't
I really
see
struggled
anything
because
like that.
I was seeing
And I know Dame moved when he was quite
only
young.
books by and
Yeah.
lectures by and workshops by mostly white men
So
in the sustainable farming world. And so I started to question whether I really had a
I
place
lost my
in that
place.
movement,
It
and whether
happens
I was
on
a
Zoom.
traitor
It's
to my
one of those
people and my
days.
ancestors in
So
choosing
I
a
would
life
love to
on
know,
land.
Damon, Imani,
So it wasn't
for you,
until I met
both,
Karen Washington
what
at
was
a
the narrative
conference
that
called the
you
Northeast
heard, if
Organic
anything,
Farming
about
Association
New Haven
annual summer
growing up?
conference.
Was
I had
there
gone
a
around with these
history
little slips of
that
paper
you
and gave them
learned?
to everyone who appeared, Black, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous, and said,
What I
let's
knew
meet at
most
1
was just
o'clock
that
under this tree
there were a
and
lot of
talk about what
immigrants
it's like to be
here,
people of
European
color
immigrants
in
and
organic
stuff.
farming.
And also
And she
that
came and she
basically
said,
that Yale
child,
is
don't
what
worry.
made New
Like,
Haven,
our ancestors have
and
been
not the
doing
other way
this.
around.
We're going to have our own
So
conference
that was
one
the
day.
narrative
We're
that
going
I
to
was
bring our people back to the
You
land.
said you were taught
And
that Yale
she
made
wrote
New Haven.
the forward
Yeah,
for the book,
it's just
and,
like,
and she's
Yale
become a
is like
dear
such a
friend
big
and mentor
institution.
and
So
colleague
it's like
and
Yale's
collaborator.
influence
But
on
that
New Haven
moment was a turning
instead
point
of like
for
New
me
Haven
because I
influence on
developed
Yale.
a hypothesis that we belonged and
I
that
couldn't have
we
said
had
it better. It was
contributed as a
the same
people
things for me, especially the
to sustainable
thinking that
agriculture.
Yale made
And
New
it
Haven
didn't
exactly
actually
what it
take
is.
a
And
lot of research to
if the
confirm
first
that.
thing you think about like New Haven is Yale, so like I'm glad we got to dig deeper into like the history.
Yeah, and for either of you, was this the first time that you were getting any African American Latinx history, whether it was local or national, in class? I know that I've spoken quite a bit to Jeanette Morrison, who's one of the alders. She's actually the alder for the Dixwell neighborhood. And she has this story about how growing up in New Haven, she learned this narrative that Martin Luther King was a good guy, Malcolm X was a bad guy, which is a lie, and that Rosa Parks rode on a bus, and that was it. That was all she learned.
Throughout metro experience throughout high school, there was sprinkled in a little bit of it, but it was not as intense this year. Like we had 2 different classes where we actually learned about a lot of Latinx and African American history. It was international issues and also in Natalia's African American Latinx class.
Yeah, and I took AP US history. So like in that, I also got to learn some African American, Latinx, and Indigenous people's history. So like between these couple of classes, Metro definitely did a good job educating us on minority history.
Natalia, I would love to know from you a little bit about the genesis of this project. And you mentioned it at the beginning, but of course, part of this is recent legislation that has really been led by students, or originally was led by students coming to the Capitol, giving incredible testimony last year. So I would love to know from you a little bit more about how this developed.
Yeah, so it began with the MAP project, and then the virtual walking tour sort of grew out of that. So starting with the MAP project, I mean, I've for a long time had a dream of creating a space where young people can actually be like the experts of their own cities and their own histories, and actually can be paid to be tour guides. People come and visit. New Haven has a lot of tourism, and I think that young people should be the ones who get to tell the story of New Haven, and that I think that can be a really radical act in the way that education can, especially when young people, especially youth of color, are the voice of that. So that's kind of where the idea stemmed from, and I didn't really know that it would in this year come to fruition, right? So the MAP was this idea, well, we could share it with folks far and wide virtually. And also we had folks come into the classroom, and we students were guides of a virtual tour within the room that we organized kind of chronologically, in addition to the maps being available. And then there were a group of 6 students. So in addition to Dame and Imani, it's Flor Jimenez, Darlene Chantineth, Angel Rovera, and Kalia Ramos were the other 4 students who participated in creating the virtual walking tour of the 2 different neighborhoods. And these are students that, showed a particular interest in this, students who I've taught for multiple years. And it was done all entirely remotely. Part of it still during the school year, and part of it during summer, and students, devoting their time and energy and their voices to this work. And we were supposed to, do the actual walking tour in real life with other people as part of Arts and Ideas, but of course it was instead virtual.
And Dame and Imani, for both of you, walk me through what it was like to work on this as students. Everything from thinking, okay, I'm really interested in a site or a number of sites, to the research you did, to the recordings that folks made. I want to know it all.
So when I started with the map, I chose the site Bergamo's Community Theater just because that site is personal to me. I worked at the theater for the past 3 years with the founder Rafael Ramos. So in order to get the information for that, all I did was interview him. Like I called him like, Rafael, I'm doing like a project on the theater. Like, tell me about it. So he ran me through like how it started. So it was exciting to learn about the history of a place that I know and like I go to and experience. When it came to like the actual walking tours, we had to do that, like Natalia said, at home. So it was a little bit difficult just trying to like find like a quiet space to like record from like outside noise. Like I have a lot of siblings, so like, they'll like come in like, Imani, what are you doing? I'm like, hey guys, I gotta do this. But it came to life. It sounds good. And it was a fun thing to do. That's about it.
For me, I chose Music Union because I'm really into music and everything, and it was really fun to learn about how like there's a lot of famous musicians coming out of New Haven specifically. That was really interesting. Researching and staying home, for me, I feel like it was kind of easier. Like it was at the time where we actually like were locked down, so like I really had nothing else really to do at the time. So like it was easier for me to focus on my work and everything. Recording, I'm here by myself most of the time in my house, so it was pretty easy for me personally. It was just so many takes I had to do over and over again. I had to try to make it as perfect as possible.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. So some podcasters talk about like recording in a closet under, layers of clothing. Like what was the recording process like for all of you? And Natalia, I heard your voice in there too. So I'd love to hear from you how it was as well.
I want to jump in first of all to say it was really great to work with Tiffany Marie Stewart and Donelle Durden, who run Align with us here in New Haven. And they gave us, I had never heard that, and they gave us that advice to record in a closet covered by a blanket. And when I shared that with the students, they were not so sure about it. But I did record a couple. I think I did the intro and one other piece. And yes, I did a lot of takes, and I did try a couple of them under a blanket. It's true.
Yeah, I did mine under a blanket too. I had a bunch of pillows under there, the blanket over my head, getting kind of hot under there, but you had to keep doing the takes until you were done. So yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely under the blanket on my floor with the phone propped up in a way I could record, and it took so many tries. Oh my goodness. But yeah.
It's hard. It's hard, right?
Yeah, it is hard. I was getting hot and irritated. Like I would listen to it, like I would get to the end of recording and then I'd mess up on one word. Then I do the whole thing all over again. Like things like that. It was just really tiring. I was so happy when it was finally complete.
And Tiffany and Donelle really helped us with, if there was a little background noise, they're just kind of editing geniuses, and they were able to get that out. And also sometimes we recorded especially long, entries in pieces, and they were able to splice it for us and do all that. So just huge shout out to Tiffany and Donnell to align with us.
Yeah, and Natalia, I wanted to know specifically how you got involved with them, because that's a magical collaboration, and they do beautiful, beautiful work in New Haven.
Yeah, I was not familiar with them, and I'm so happy to know about them now. And it was really, honestly, I was walking my dog around the neighborhood, ran into a neighbor who said, "Oh, I would really love, if your students, I would pay for your students' podcasts about, the walking tour." And I said, "Oh yeah," I'm just feeling like I don't know if I can do the tech part of it. And then we were, Ann Watkins, shout out to Ann Watkins, connected us to Tiffany and Donnell, who are friends of hers.
Oh. And Imani and Dean, before we go on, I want to ask you a little bit more about the sites that you both chose. So Bregamos is a special place, and the other day I was talking to someone who grew up in New Haven, and they had never heard of it, which is maybe a testament to both the lack of local history, and I read it as a testament to also how segregated the city sometimes is. But for you, what did you learn about Bregamos that maybe you didn't know before that was so exciting to you?
Well, just how it came to be. I knew that Raphael had started it just because he wanted to give back to the community, but I didn't know how long ago. It was in 2000, and he got the idea when he was in college. So it was just nice to hear him go through just his thought process of why it started and how it started. It's a nonprofit. He said that he wanted a space for people to be able to express themselves through music and theater, because it's therapy. And just to hear him elaborate on why he thought theater and music was helpful to people, it was just nice to sit there and listen to. So yeah.
And do you find yourself thinking about the intersection of arts and history? Because I know for Raphael, he thinks about arts, history, public health.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely an intersection between all of that. Music is a big part of our history. Music is ever changing, just as history is. So yeah, the music changes with the times, and the times change with us.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, it's okay.
And Dame, actually, that seems like a perfect segue into your interest area with the map. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what you learned through your research.
I wish I remembered the name off the top of my head, but there's a very famous New Haven doo-wop group that made a very famous song in the era when that was famous. Not famous, when that was popular. I forgot the name of them, but the song. Yeah, Five Satins, the Five Satins. That was really interesting that we had a really famous group like that, and it was in the basement of a local New Haven church as well. That was pretty cool.
That's in the still of the night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I want to say that, Dame and Imani, and other students did one site on the original map.
Right.
Then we got to build off of their work, and then Dame and Imani each recorded so many sites along with the other 4 students. So they learned a lot, not just about the particular site they did, but some of the other ones. And I think they had a couple of other sites prepared to share about if you want to talk about those, or if you want to hear about those, Lucy.
Yeah, I would love to hear about those, actually. Let's go into that, and maybe in a little while we can play another clip as well.
Yeah, so the site that I did for the podcast, one of the ones that really caught my interest was Grace Hopper College, just because that was really recent history. I think it was 2016 around that time. That had to do with Yale. They had a college called Calhoun College, named after a slave owner. Dishwasher named Corey Menifee, who worked at the same college. He looked up one day and seen stained glass art of slaves picking cotton, but it looked like they were happy to do it, and he found it really disrespectful. So he broke the glass window. He was charged, but New Haven really showed up and showed out for him, and he got his charges dropped. He got his job back, and he also got the name of the college changed to Grace Hopper College. So instead of it being named after a slave owner, now it's named after a really influential woman in history. So I feel like that was a really good site to talk about. And I bet a lot of people didn't even know that Calhoun was racist or that the name was changed to Grace Hopper. But now, if you listen to the podcast, now you know.
My favorite site to do had to be the Black Panthers when they came to rally for the people who went to court here. I did not know New Haven had Black Panthers at all, actually, I'm being honest. I did not know that many people would show up to New Haven for something like that also. That was really interesting to me. And Miss Natalia also told me it's like 50-year anniversary of it and everything. So that's pretty cool as well. That like I learned about it, and it's like a historic year about it as well.
And I think, I could be wrong, I think either yesterday or today was George Edwards' birthday, actually. So just fun fact that you learned scrolling through Instagram. And what about the Panther trial? Because you're totally right. Until I moved to New Haven and started working for a local news outlet, no one said, hey, this history is here. Like no one, so when I was working a day job, no one said like, hey, this is a really historical city, let me tell you why. Sorry. I guess like tell me a little, sorry. I guess tell me a little bit more about why learning about the history of the Black Panthers, specifically in New Haven, was interesting to you or exciting to you.
It was interesting and exciting because I'm really interested in learning like a lot about my own people's history and all that. And it was good to see that New Haven actually had a good, like, I would say like a good stand for like rights and all that. Like, and actually like people in New Haven, like I seen that Yale students actually helped the Panthers who came over, gave them food, shelter and all that. So it's good to see that like New Haven, even though now they're doing the protests and all that, like they always been part of the helping out and the political struggle and all that.
And do both of you, and Natalia, you're welcome to answer this as well. I mean, do both of you feel like you were taught sort of a revisionist history or a history where things were omitted either deliberately or maybe not deliberately by educators?
Like you said earlier about the lady who learned about the three people, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. Rosa Parks. That's really growing up until I went to Metro. That's really all I knew. I only knew them three people. Every Black History Month, we learned about those same three people, nothing else. And that it's kind of frustrating because there's way more people who've done just as important things in history, and we don't know nothing about them. I feel like that's just kind of sad.
Yeah. So like, in school, we're being taught by teachers who were also taught the same, like, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. So they don't really have much exposure to teach us either. So all through, you know, elementary school, middle school, I didn't learn anything about that, probably because the teachers didn't know about it. And I mean, I can say that it's not their fault because they weren't taught it in school. But I feel like at a certain point, we just have to start self-educating. Which is I'm happy that the teachers in Metro really exposed us to it, because now we can also teach our friends, our family, and hopefully there can be a new generation of people who don't have to grow up with the same bland history, especially local history, because New Haven is so rich in it. So we think that this is a step in the right direction.
I think we are definitely blessed to have went to Metro with the teachers we had. Not saying New Haven, other schools don't have it, but I know specifically Metro, like they really try and care about helping us and learning themselves and helping us learn.
Yeah, like as they learn new things, like they'll always come back to class and tell us, like if they learn something, then we also learn it as well. And then we go and we tell our families, our friends, and then just keep going like that. So we're really grateful for the teachers.
And the students teach us too. So it goes both ways for sure. And I want to just add that my own schooling, like in the suburbs of Cleveland, going to public schools, was also, you know, I was sorely miseducated and didn't learn, you know, nearly enough Black history or literature, or, you know, there's so much missing from my own education. So yeah, the sort of self-education and the always ongoing learning was necessary for me too. And I want to say that in the African American Latinx history class and also in my other classes, we do a lot of talking about dominant narrative versus counter narrative, right? And so, students can analyze the, what's being presented to them and what has been taught to them in those terms.
And one thing I wanted to also ask about before we listen to another clip is this also this mapping project goes into pre-colonial history, which I think is really, really great. And for a number of people I've talked to, and I know also myself growing up in the suburbs of Detroit, Natalia, I was taught a history that started with slavery, with colonization and slavery, an American history that started with those things. And so I'm wondering, for everyone on the call, what does it mean to really go back further and say we need to recognize that this land was stolen land and belonged to other people before it belonged to us?
Yeah, to recognize that it's stolen land, it just reminds us that, there were people here, there were societies here, there were families here. So it kind of humanizes the land that we're on. We don't just see it as, American land. This is land that existed to people way before us. So it kind of makes it more real. A lot of the time people teach, only like the bad sides of minority history, like, the genocide, slavery, stuff like that. But African American and Latinx history taught us like that we existed before that we were people before that. So it is comforting to know that we were finally getting taught that side of history.
Yeah, I'm glad that learning African American and Latinx history class, we were able to unglorify colonization by also celebrating the victories that African American and Latinx have had. I think that was really good to know, because there's more, like Amani just said, there's more than just slavery, more than just the civil rights movement. Those are important things. There's more to that, and I'm just glad that I can have a fresh and a new kind of like class about learning about that kind of stuff. Like, I'm tired of hearing the same thing all the time. Like, that's for me personally.
Yeah, that's just it. Seeing this history from a different light was definitely refreshing, like James said. A lot of people don't get that side. A lot of people didn't even know that certain things existed before slavery. But there was so much to us before that. There was so much to the Native Americans before Columbus came, or before anything. So just to learn about that side was like really, really nice.
Natalia, did you want to hop in?
Sure, yeah. The way that the class is organized is we began talking about even just the words we use and like the language we use. So talking, Black versus African American and what are sort of like the roots of that, and definitely talking about Hispanic versus Latino versus Latinx and people of color and all these terms, right? So that we're at least on the same page and understand the history. And actually, there wasn't full agreement about the language we should use, but it was still a really worthwhile discussion. After we kind of could stand on that ground of some common understanding of our vocabulary, then we began with, we started in Africa, right? And we could have taught a whole class on just the history of the African continent, because that history it's the oldest history, on earth, right? So beginning there felt really important. And it was really just, touching on a couple of different examples throughout history, like that the oldest university is in Africa, that the oldest art that had previously been believed to have been found in Europe was actually from the African continent. And so many more examples. The, civilizations that were, enduring and powerful and also had women as leaders of them. And just, so many other examples. And then and so we talked about that before we ever even talked about enslavement. And when we did talk about enslavement, talking about the fact that folks in Africa resisted there as well as every step, every single moment after that, right? So we have to remember that resistance started there, and looking at the communities that created walled cities around them, to protect themselves and their community from enslavement, and building their homes in the middle of a lake on stilts so they could always see if someone was coming, all to resist enslavement. So beginning there, and then doing a similar sort of look at, again, the Americas. You could have multiple history classes just about the Americas, but beginning with the communities that were here and still are here, though not in the same numbers, before we ever even talked about European colonization.
Harry, I'm wondering if we can play another clip, please.
You've now reached the oldest and first charted cemetery in the nation, Grove Street Cemetery. As you pass by Grove Street Cemetery, you might consider entering to look at the grave sites of historic African American New Haveners. Though there aren't many here, a few must be mentioned. Laid to rest here is William Grimes, an African American man who escaped slavery by hiding in an empty cart and barrel on a ship in Georgia and eventually ending up on Long Wharf here in New Haven. Born in 1784, Grimes was one of the first formerly enslaved people to write an autobiography, Life of William Grimes, the Runaway Slave, which was published in 1825. He went to become a renowned barber right here in New Haven. You can also find Mary A. Goodman, an African-American woman who donated all of her life savings to the Yale Divinity School to educate African-American clergy. Ebenezer Bassett's final resting place is also here at Grove Street Cemetery. Bassett was the first Black person to graduate from Central Connecticut State University in 1869. As the United States Minister Resident to Haiti, he became the first Black diplomat in the United States. Finally, the Amistad Rebellion, which is discussed in our tour of the Hill, is also present here at the cemetery. 53 Mende men were kidnapped from Sierra Leone and brought here to the Americas. Rising up to take back their freedom, they ended up in New Haven. Winning their case for freedom, many of the men were able to return to Sierra Leone. 6 of the Mende men died soon after arriving in New Haven. They are buried here, and there is also a marker that pays tribute to them. Finally, if you walk around the cemetery, you can also find the gravestones of African American Civil War veterans who are buried here.
So I have to say with that site in particular, I was under the impression, all the research I did, I was like, no, it's not about Grove Street Cemetery. You have to go to Evergreen Cemetery for the real, Black, Indigenous, Latinx history. And we do have that as well with, Augusta Rodriguez and Boucher, who's buried there. But Imani was like, there's got to be some, important Black figures and other folks buried here. And so she did all this research. And so honestly, Imani's got to speak on this because she taught me and everyone else all of that.
There wasn't much to it. There was an article, I think it was done by, I don't even remember. It was like a news site here, but they had specifically talked about the historical people buried in Grove Street. There were a couple articles like that, and even on the Grove Street site, it talked about some of the really historic people that were buried there. I guess one of the sad things that I found in my research was just that, like, even though people are dead, there's still some segregation in the cemetery. So you won't really find, like, some of the African Americans mixed with the white people. They still have like a certain section. So I just feel bad for the people that even that kind of followed them. But I'm also glad to know that, today you have like an African American woman telling the whole city that they exist and that they're here. So that's just like the upside to it.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so, I think I said this, but I just geek out learning history. I love it. So, but you nailed it in that you're doing a service to the whole city. And I'm wondering, I also, when I listen to that, I can't help but thinking about how past and present and future, like all of these histories inform each other. And it was actually Grimes's great-great-great-granddaughter who passed on the information about the commission for a William Lanson tribute statue to the current sculptor who will be installing it on the Farmington Canal in September 26th. So it's that like arc of history always comes around, and New Haven's like the size of a minute. So of course that happened, and But I'm wondering for all of you how it feels to see this history sort of coming alive, and what your hopes are now that the project is out there. And really those are two different questions, so we can separate them.
Do you want to start, you two?
I guess. Seeing the project come alive, it was really exciting just to know that this is something that, you know, I personally worked on and my classmates worked on it. Just to know that people around the city are able to enjoy it. I didn't imagine it getting to this part, like where we do an interview on it either. So just to see that it's been getting so much exposure, you know, I feel like the project isn't in vain. But like outside of myself and the people that I know, like I said before, I'm just happy that these historic people are getting put on the pedestal that they deserve, because their history should have been taught to us a long time ago, especially growing up in New Haven. I've been in New Haven public schools since I was in 3rd grade, and it didn't take till high school to learn about these people. So I'm just happy that even though it happened late, better late than never, and now I get to help other people get exposed to the same history, to the important history and what made our city what it is today. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad, like Maya just said, people who may have thought they would be forgotten throughout history and that their achievements and what they accomplished may not be enough. I'm glad we are bringing them back to the surface and showing what they have done. The project as a whole, I'm actually, even though I would have liked to have done it, walking with people. I think is greater exposure to people the way we had presented it this time. I like how like clean it is, how everybody could go, they could take their time and everything instead of walking. They can't really imagine everything when we walking. Some of them places not up no more. You could look right there's pictures of it. You listening to it, you could think in your own imagination, oh, I wonder how it been back then, all that. I think that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, now that we have it on audio, people can like do the tours over and over. They can do it once themselves. They can take people back with them. We kinda made it longer than what it would have been if we just took people. Now it can like last forever. It can exist forever. People can always go back.
Might get tired of hearing my voice, but I mean, you can listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Imani. You had more to say?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that I like how people can just like go back and listen to it over and over. Share the link. It's easier to share the link than it is to like do these tours over and over. You would have needed so many different tour guides, but it exists forever now. So history on that.
Yeah, I love that now it's so accessible to people. So, you know, folks can do it on their own time and their own pace. And also, even if you're not in New Haven or you're not able to like take the walk or the drive or the ride, you can just listen. And like Dame said, there's all the text is there and there's images as well. And on the map, you can, there's links on the map so you can learn more and go deeper into these histories. So I just love how accessible it is and how wide of a reach it has. I recently looked at the map and it's Google Maps. And so it tells you how many views it's had. And it's had over 11,000. It's like 11,500 views, which is just astonishing. And I just want to say, like, these two people in front of you, Imani and Dame, and the other students are not only lifting up history, but they're making history. Like, this is going to live on in history. And the fact that young people made it is really significant.
We're famous now.
Yeah, you're famous now. Sure.
It's true. Well, one thing I also wanted to ask was, Natalia, at the top of I think it's the People's History of Dixwell tour, you say this is incomplete. Right. Like we plan to keep adding to it. And so, Dame and Imani, I'd love to know from both of you, what are some sites that you think you'd be really interested in adding in the future? Or what are some things you get excited about learning about the city around you?
Something that we can definitely add is the removal of the Christopher Columbus statue in Worcester Park. We can definitely add that. So hopefully next year, if this project continues, they can talk about that, elaborate on that. I think with the climate of the world that we're in now, that was a really big accomplishment, especially in New Haven. Some cities aren't even letting people touch their Confederate statue, but we took it down and we're going to replace it. So that definitely should be added to the map.
I have nothing specific on my mind, but I would like if we could find more about like building up community kind of things, like how mostly African American communities, how they got built up to be or how they are now. I would like to know like the history of like us, like I don't know, make our community the way they are now, like how the Hill became how it is, other places like Dixwell, how New Hallville and all that, how it became to be like how it is, like a little bit more of like how we moved in there, how we made our own kind of thing like that.
And also I think like New Haven Green as well, because like I said, we've been having those protests lately, so we can definitely talk about the protests that we've had this year. Talk about the green and everything, the police station, things like that.
Hopefully up and coming juniors and seniors who do take the class have this have the same passion that us six did to do it and continue it, because there's gonna be there's endless amounts of African American Latinx history that can be added. So try to make this thing as long and as keep it going as long as possible.
And Natalia, did you want to jump in? Don't let me interrupt.
Yeah, I some of these historic sites and events I found online. Others I found at the in the archives at the local history room in the Ives branch, New Haven Public Library. So I am excited to do more of that, and also, be able to take students into the archives so that they can, unearth these different, archival, gems that are left out and are not digitized. And also, so much of this history, people have in their memories and in the stories that they're telling, and so they're not even on paper yet, or we don't know where to look for them, right? So I think another component of this could be more oral histories with folks, and maybe that'll be like the next iteration of this project.
Yeah, and so I promised that we would leave time for this, and I know we could probably speak for like 3 hours about it, but we don't have 3 hours, unfortunately. But I would love to know, and Damon Imani, especially from you, as students, what does public education really need to be doing better? And we sort of tiptoed around this earlier, but when it comes to teaching accurate and fair and complete history, and I both mean like the history of the country, but also local history, the history of the city where you live, and also the history of race and racism.
I feel, especially I think at every school, but especially in more African American areas and communities, I feel like from K to 12, it should be a required class. I feel like we should not be waiting to high school, or we should not be learning about the same 3 people all 12 years of school. I think that's really important, so we grow up knowing that we actually have made contributions to this country. We've done important things. We've done there's so many inventions. If Black people didn't make it, like the country would not be the same at all. There's so many people who if they didn't get into political power, there wouldn't be the same things, all of that stuff. I think that's really important. Also, I think that's why I was saying all schools too. I also think, because like Amani said earlier, they've been taught the same thing. They only taught about the same 3 people in white communities as well. Or I think they need to learn about it too, so they could see like, oh, Black people actually have done something in this country. They actually are important in this country. Maybe that can help kind of like stop a little bit of the racism. But like I said, there's also need to be self-taught. The parents also need to be helping them out as well. Like they could go to school and learn this stuff, but their parents could be opposite. But like them learning in school could help them be like, mom and dad, this is not right. I know this. Black people are like this, not like what you're saying. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, for me, you said how to make it fair. So something that Miss Natalia did before this class even started, at the end of my junior year, she asked us, like, what do we want to be taught? So we already know that we've been taught slavery, we've been taught civil rights, we've been taught oppression, but like we made sure to tell her that, we want to be taught the victories, we want to be taught good things that we did, we want to teach the resistance. And that's exactly what she did. She listened to us and she taught it, not in a whitewashed history way that we're used to, but she taught it in a real authentic way. So I'm really appreciative for her for like even asking us what we thought about it, and letting us give her ideas. And even during the class, like people were able to suggest things to learn. So that was really important, just to like listen to the students and like their wants and their needs and actually make it come true. So
yeah. And Natalia, this question is for you, but Damon Imani, it's also for you. So in New Haven, but this is the story often in cities around the country, a disproportionate number of educators to students are white. And both Natalia and Damon Imani, what's the difference, if there are educators listening, and I hope there are, what's the difference between a teacher saying, I'm not racist, which I've heard a lot from teachers, and an educator saying, I'm an anti-racist educator? What's the difference there?
In the way they approach subjects. Like Natalia did, she asked us what we want to know. She learned with us instead of finding a printout kind of thing of a lesson plan and going with that and not changing it, not letting us add to the conversation or add to the curriculum. I feel like she actually let us help build the curriculum with her this year. I like that a lot. So saying you're just not racist, but you're going on with the same old routine all the time is not like doing nothing at all. You're just saying words. But actually trying to change, actually learning with us, actually letting us say what we want to learn and help. I mean, that helps a lot.
For a teacher to say that they're an anti-racist educator, I feel like that's better wording. Just because to say that you're an anti-racist educator, you're recognizing racism, but also teaching it in a counteractive way. So you're recognizing that there's dominant narratives, and then you're using your power in education to teach the class that this isn't how it's always been, this isn't how it has to be, and this is how we can change it.
Yeah. I just couldn't have said it better myself. The only thing I would add is that we live in a racist society, right? Racism is embedded in all of our institutions, including education. And if we say, oh, I'm not racist, it's like we disavow that, like as if we have no role in it, as if we don't, benefit from it or aren't oppressed by it, right? And we are all affected by it in different ways. And we have to admit it exists before we can actually do any of the work to dismantle it, right? So we have to name it as something that is all around us, and that's something that we're willing to fight. And it's an ongoing process, right? You don't like arrive and it's not a static anti-racist educator. Here I am, I made it, right? It's an ongoing, like lifelong process that we need to all engage in.
Yeah, definitely. Just like recognizing your biases, like in the classroom, off the classroom, and just learning from your students, especially if you are white teaching in the inner city, learning from your students, learning how to respond to them, making sure that you understand that they might have different lives than you, like coming to school. So just, I think that anti-racist educator is a better term than just saying that you're not racist. That's like the equivalent to saying, like, oh, I don't see color. Like, no, like there is color. So you got to recognize it. So that way you can fix it and help change it.
That's right.
More affected by it.
Absolutely. And then just my final question is, for all of you, I imagine that you feel that you have a different relationship with the city now, maybe. Do you find yourself either walking past a place or driving past a place, or Imani maybe, picking up the phone and talking to Raphael and experiencing New Haven differently because of this? And is it your hope that other folks will have the same experience?
Yeah, definitely. Like driving past certain places, like now I know what it is. Like I can talk about it. I know how the Amistad ship is on Longboard. So when I went with my brother, I could like tell him some things about like, oh, this is what happened with these people. When I drive past Grove Street Cemetery, I can name people who are in it. It's not just a cemetery anymore. I know that there are living people in there. So it just humanizes the place around me. It makes it come more alive. I know that New Haven is a historical town, but we didn't really understand the depth of the history. Now I know it in a different depth. So it feels more personal.
I live in Hamden, so I have to go down to Dixwell almost all the time wherever I go. So like seeing it going down there, I'm just like, I envision like, oh, like look how much stuff is here. Like everything feels so different to me every time I look. I'm like, oh, this is like really like a historic like location. Like they should put like a sign up saying this is a historic district right here or something like that. Like this is so much history just going down. I'm looking on both sides of the street like, oh, I remember talking about this. I remember somebody in my class did this. Like it's really cool. Think about that.
And there's also the question of what's missing, right? What's not here, and the history of what could have been here and isn't. And, you know, that's one of the reasons that, you know, Dame and Imani are about to you know, they're Metro grads now, right? So they're no longer active Metro students, and they are both planning on leaving New Haven, at least for a little while. And maybe they can tell you about why they're not staying here and where they're going.
Yes, that'd be great.
I actually did one of the walking tours about it, how New Haven could have had an HBCU. I think that I might have thought about, I probably would have stayed if they had one, but they don't have one. So I will be attending Alabama A&M University, HBCU. Personally, I've grown up in a very Black excellence household. I'm thankful for that. That's helped me be grateful for being who I am and not like shining down on myself like, oh, why am I like this? That's helped a lot, and it's helped me pick like, oh, I want to go to HBCU. I want to be around my culture. I seen something somebody said, I have all my life to be a minority in America. Let me spend at least these 4 years being part of my own culture all the time, kind of thing like that. So I like that a lot. So that's why I picked Alabama A&M.
Yeah, I'm also going to be attending an HBCU. I'll be at Howard University in Washington, D.C. The reason why I chose Howard is just because the same thing as Dame, I kind of just wanted to be around, you know, like-minded African-American people. I don't know, I heard some things that people say, like, you know, you can't really, they kind of talk down on HBCUs because it's almost like an isolated place with just us. We don't really get that. I know New Haven is like a multicultural, majority minority kind of city, but in the real world, like Dame said, we're gonna be washed out by so many different people. I just think that being educated at a place, people that are the same as you are just comfortable. I think there's gonna be a lot of different. It's gonna be like a culture shock, I think, to me. I definitely think so. The energy on HBCU campuses are just different.
Oh man.
The band, the dances, the people. I'm just excited to experience things like that. And even though COVID is kind of ruining it, just a little bit.
This year.
Yeah, just for the fall, hopefully in the spring things kind of clear up. But I'm just happy to get the experience. And if New Haven did get that HBCU that we were supposed to have, then I think I probably would have went there too.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about that, it's on the Dixwell tour. It's stop number 22, all about the attempt to create an HBCU in New Haven and the reasons that it didn't happen, and the resistance by white people, and namely by including the mayor at the time, and especially a large group of faculty and administration from Yale University resisted it, feeling threatened by an HBCU. And it's, you know, that also is a counter narrative that we need to talk about in this city.
Yeah, and this seems like a good as I can't talk. My words are all gone. But this seems like a good time as ever to be talking about it. I want to thank all of you so much. Natalia Berginski is a teacher at Metropolitan Business Academy. Dane Dillard and Imani Cotton are recent graduates of Metropolitan Business Academy. They are headed to HBCUs in the fall because we don't have one here. And if you want to find out more, we will be posting the links to A People's History of the Hill and A People's History of Dixwell with this interview on Facebook Live. Thank you all so much. This has been great. And I'm going to go geek out over history for the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
you.